The boy raised his piece of wood, fervently proclaiming the supremacy of mages over humanity. To him, those legendary figures were the absolute rulers of everything. He explained that these beings were nobles and knights, heirs to ancient powers, while his friend played the role of the monster to be defeated. In the heat of the performance, however, the young hero miscalculated the movement of his makeshift weapon. The wooden stick came down hard, hitting the little playmate squarely on the forehead. While the girl screamed in pain and indignation, the boy just laughed, finding the situation funny. In the background, however, rumors about a real monster began to circulate. The girl protested the unfair blow, but both of their attention was soon diverted by the approach of a respectable figure. The grandfather appeared accompanied by other adults. While the children greeted him, the elders discussed in hushed tones about a creature sighted at the village entrance the night before. The adults' serious conversation and the mention of a real danger instantly captured the two children's curiosity. In the boy's fertile imagination, stories about mages and mystical powers came to life, projecting divine and imposing figures. Excited by the stories and recent rumors, the protagonist turned to the elder, seeking to confirm the truth of those legends. The old man, however, cast a look that mixed seriousness and a hint of concern when he heard his grandson's question. Despite the obvious tension among the adults, the boy insisted on the subject, gesturing enthusiastically in front of his family. The elder remained quiet for a moment, his heavy expression indicating that the matter was not mere child's play. The reality was that the sighted beast was not a myth, but a terrifying monstrosity shrouded in shadows and lightning. Faced with the gravity of the situation, the woman pulled the girl into a protective hug, fearing the danger that haunted the village. The boy felt the weight of the moment, the cold sweat betraying his nervousness in the face of the situation he had created. Meanwhile, the girl received a gesture of comfort, although the fright and pain were still etched on her childish face. The grandfather, in silence, bent down to pick up the object that had caused the incident, removing the weapon from the children's reach. Beside them, one of the men watched the scene, unable to hide his own tension and concern about what this could mean. The old man held the piece of wood firmly, his gaze conveying a stern seriousness that dispensed with any words at that moment. Far away, the landscape opened into a tranquil valley, where life seemed to follow a much more peaceful and illuminated rhythm. The gentle breeze caressed the fur of the creatures that rested carefree under the sun, enjoying the calm. There was Tavern, the shepherd, enjoying the peace of the countryside to take a well-deserved nap next to his flock and his faithful dog. The young man with silver hair slowly opened his eyes, still half-dazed, awakening from his makeshift rest with an expression of boredom. Surrounded by the sheep that bleated softly around him, he remained lying down, showing no haste to get up for work. The flock continued to graze peacefully through the vast green field, oblivious to any concern beyond the fresh grass. The rural property remained silent, bathed in daylight, suggesting a monotonous and isolated routine from the rest of the world. Convinced that he deserved a few more minutes of leisure, Tavern settled down again, determined to ignore his responsibilities and go back to sleep. However, the shepherd's tranquility was short-lived. Something interrupted his peace, forcing him to open one eye and face reality. The old master was already standing beside him, immediately reprimanding him for his laziness and lack of attitude in the middle of the workday. The elder observed the scene with a stern look, clearly dissatisfied with the disrespectful attitude he was witnessing. The young man with white hair, in turn, remained lying on the grass, displaying a carefree and provocative smile. Indignant, the old man confronted him about the sneaky attempt to appropriate the flock, questioning his honesty. The boy, however, remained silent, leaning comfortably on the animal as if the scolding was not directed at him. The elder's patience finally ran out, and he shouted for the intruder to disappear from there immediately. The boy's relaxed expression disappeared for a moment, replaced by an intense and sharp look. He then decided to get up, shaking the dust off his clothes, while the old man awaited his reaction. Before leaving, however, the young man reached out to caress the head of the sheep that was grazing peacefully. He smiled at the animal with genuine kindness, completely ignoring the tension of the moment. Then, he turned his back to the elder and began to walk towards the mountains. The old man stayed put, closing his eyes and sighing, exhausted by the fruitless discussion. The boy continued on his way, walking away from the pasture without showing any regret. A sly smile, however, curved the young man's lips as he walked away. He glanced back, showing that the expulsion had not shaken his confidence. With a smug grin, the boy said goodbye to the flock and left the elder fuming behind. The young shepherd's gaze was calm, lost in thought as he watched the day go by. One of the sheep approached curiously, nuzzling its snout against the staff he always kept close. He walked with firm, rhythmic steps across the grass, accustomed to this peaceful routine. As he guided the flock and his dog, the boy reflected on the likelihood that perhaps those lives would never be anything but ordinary. A resigned smile appeared on his face. He seemed to have found peace in the simplicity of that destiny. Suddenly, the air changed. The young man inhaled deeply, catching a scent that did not belong to the calm of the countryside. His pupil contracted. The instinct for survival awoke instantly, sweeping away any trace of boredom. He raised his head, tense, searching for the source of that invisible disturbance that was approaching. The wind blew violently through the trees, stirring the forest and bringing with it a threatening sound. The shepherd abruptly stopped his walk, planting his feet firmly on the dirt ground. Standing on the path, he looked around, aware that the tranquility of shepherding was over. Without warning, a monstrous creature burst from the woods, advancing with lethal speed in his direction. The boy, however, did not back down. An intense aura enveloped his body, revealing that he was far from easy prey. When the beast attacked, he moved with precision, dodging the deadly claws by a hair's breadth. With a confident smile on his lips, he spun his sling, ready to turn defense into a devastating counterattack. The beast advanced with wild fury, ready to tear anything in its path to shreds. The young man, however, remained calm. He prepared his sling, coldly calculating the distance and reaction time. The weapon spun, cutting through the wind with violence. He built up the momentum needed for a decisive counterattack. Planting his foot, he anchored his base to the ground. All the strength of his body would be transferred to that single movement. His focus narrowed until nothing else existed besides the target. The concentration was absolute before the shot. With a dry snap, the projectile was released. The energy shot out, manifesting as a destructive beam of light. The attack crossed the distance in the blink of an eye, intercepting the monster's charge with brute power. The collision was violent, exploding the ground and raising an impenetrable curtain of debris. The predator suddenly knew fear. The shadow of death loomed over the creature before it could react. The impact was overwhelming, pressing the beast against the earth with crushing pressure. The boy's goal was clear from the start: the head. The blow was fatal, ending the fight instantly. The dust began to settle. The young man remained still, making sure that the threat had really ceased. He analyzed the creature's inert body. This was the first time he had used such a technique on a real monster, and the effectiveness was absolute. Faced with the brutality of the result, he considered the pragmatic need to hide the shattered corpse in some remote place. The boy sighed, relieving the tension of the moment. Despite the easy victory, the blood on his face was a reminder of the violence of the fight. The boy delved deep into his memories, recalling a crucial moment from his childhood. At that time, magic seemed natural. However, his mother's voice interrupted the game, calling him for a serious conversation. He was only 10 years old. The boy controlled several objects in the pantry with his aura, enjoying his extraordinary gifts. With an innocent smile, the boy listened to her question. The woman wanted to know if he wished to stay by her side for a long time. Tavern, however, imposed a non-negotiable condition. She demanded that he promise never to use that power from that day on. Ignoring the gravity of the request, the child ran happily towards the maternal figure, calling her by name. Tavern's expression changed sharply. Panic took over her face as she saw the boy's magic persist. The woman acted immediately, physically holding the floating wood to force the interruption of that supernatural phenomenon. As soon as his concentration was broken, the objects fell to the ground. Tavern knelt down, staring at the boy seriously. The young boy felt her touch and the change in the atmosphere. Confusion replaced his earlier smile as he noticed the tension. The tools and firewood, once animated by his power, now lay inert and lifeless on the floor. She looked at him with a mixture of pleading and fear, trying to make the child understand the danger he was in. The boy listened attentively. Tavern began to narrate an ancient story, asking him never to forget those words. The memory of that day remained vivid. He remembered the legend she told about the origin of everything. The mother described a divine and golden entity, the one who descended from the heavens to save ancient humanity. The staff slipped from Tavern's hands, colliding against the wooden floor. The dry sound echoed, marking an abrupt interruption in the moment. The woman quickly turned her body, alerted by something that demanded her immediate attention. Tension took over her posture. A shadow of the past seemed to hover over them, contrasting the stern figure of an elder with the apparent innocence of the boy in that memory. The boy, however, maintained a neutral expression. His big eyes observed everything, without fully understanding the weight of that atmosphere. Tavern, on the other hand, couldn't hide her shock. Her open mouth and fixed gaze revealed that she feared what was to come. Back in the present, the protagonist watched the outside through the cabin window. The morning silence seemed to carry an omen. He pushed the curtain aside with a subtle movement of his hand. He needed to confirm the origin of the disturbance he felt approaching. Through the glass, his cold eyes analyzed the scene. The young man didn't seem surprised, just resigned to what he saw outside. The window framed the apparent tranquility outside, but he knew that the peace of that refuge had been broken. Violent blows shook the front door. Someone outside demanded his presence, yelling without any patience. The boy leaned against the doorframe, listening to the commotion. His expression was one of pure disinterest, as if that aggressiveness was just a trivial annoyance. A group of men waited in the yard, with threatening postures and pieces of wood in their hands. The hostility in their eyes was evident. Faced with that furious reception, the young man's only response was a long yawn. He seemed more bored than intimidated by the crowd. The protagonist walked outside, calmly going to meet the group. His relaxed attitude contrasted with the rigid tension of the men in front of him. Without wasting time with words, one of the men stepped forward and grabbed the boy's collar violently. The physical confrontation had begun. The man shouted furious accusations, blaming him for abandoning someone to be devoured by monsters. To emphasize his anger, the villager tightened the young man's collar, keeping him trapped under his physical control while demanding answers. Behind the aggressor, the rest of the group waited. They held improvised weapons, united by silent judgment and hostility. The accusation was clear and cutting. They believed that cowardice had prevented him from fighting the beast when necessary. However, the young man showed no fear. A mocking smile appeared on his face as he faced the situation with total indifference. That arrogant reaction was the last straw. The man's fury exploded when he realized he wasn't being taken seriously. Losing control, the villager threw a powerful punch, determined to punish that insolence with brute violence. The blow, however, only found emptiness. The young man dodged with supernatural ease, moving his head at the last moment. He casually advanced towards the armed group, completely ignoring the man who had just attacked. His expression remained calm, almost bored, as if that dangerous ambush was nothing more than a minor annoyance. The initial aggressor, carried away by the momentum of his own failed punch, lost his balance and collapsed humiliated on the grass. Without hesitation, another man from the group took the opportunity and ran to attack from behind, brandishing a wooden stick. The young man reacted instantly. His hand intercepted the attack with precision, grabbing the man's wrist and stopping the weapon in the air. The force applied was so great that the wood cracked and broke in half. The attacker choked, shocked by the sudden display of power. Taking advantage of the enemy's surprise, the young man turned his body and retaliated with a fluid and devastating movement. In the past, the young man dodged the attack with supernatural agility, causing his opponent's blow to only cut through the air. The force of the counterattack was so great that the opponent's wooden weapons flew far away, spinning uncontrollably through the sky. The aggressor fell heavily on the grass, defeated and screaming in pain from the unexpected impact. In a few moments, the white-haired boy was the only one standing. He casually wiped his hands, surrounded by the bodies of the other boys groaning on the ground. The young man sighed, appearing bored and disappointed with the lack of challenge that the fight provided. Realizing the situation, one of the village women nervously tried to calm things down, making up excuses to get away from there with the others. Back in the present, the protagonist put on his coat in the silence of the cabin, preparing to start the day. He held the ties of his garment, lost in momentary thoughts as he finished getting ready. However, the boy decided to leave the accessory aside, carelessly dropping it on the wooden chair. The young man closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath as if seeking patience or sensing a change in the air. The calm, however, was broken. Heavy and insistent knocks suddenly echoed on the front door. Someone outside was hitting the wood urgently and violently, demanding immediate attention. Annoyed by the noisy interruption, the protagonist abruptly opened the door, ready to confront whoever it was. The daylight revealed a burly and well-dressed man standing on the threshold, staring at the young man from head to toe. The visitor, with a face marked by time, seemed relieved and visibly emotional to finally find who he was looking for. The young man stared at the visitor, trying to process the situation. Confusion was etched on his face in the face of that unexpected figure who had appeared at his door. The burly man remained standing with a serious and expectant expression. He seemed to await an apology, or perhaps he was there to demand some specific action. However, the protagonist's gaze became analytical. He examined the stranger meticulously, assessing whether that visitor was behaving appropriately or whether he represented a real threat. His attention immediately fell on the man's waist. Unlike children's games, that guy carried a real sword, indicating that he was not an ordinary villager. The tension in the air was suddenly broken by an embarrassing sound. The visitor's stomach rumbled loudly, revealing a physical need far more urgent than any confrontation or dialogue. Faced with that, the young man couldn't help but sigh in resignation. The defensive posture needed to be put aside momentarily in the face of that pathetic situation. He decided to open the doors of his house. He invited the stranger in, understanding that no productive conversation would happen while that hunger was not satisfied. The table was set with what was available. Breads, soup, and meat were arranged, offering a simple but substantial feast. The visitor wasted no time with etiquette. He attacked the food with wild voracity, devouring whole pieces of bread as if he hadn't eaten in days. The protagonist watched the scene in silence, with his spoon suspended in the air. The man's desperate hunger was impressive and left little room for any social interaction. To accompany the heavy meal, the man turned the mug over in one go, swallowing the liquid with the same raw intensity with which he chewed. The young man, in turn, drank his content with calm and civility. He waited patiently for the other's feeding frenzy to end to understand the purpose of that visit. While watching him, the protagonist remained attentive. Even during the meal, he continued to analyze the guest's behavior, looking for clues about his identity. The attention, however, turned to the surroundings. The mention of a female figure brought to mind the image of an empty bed, suggesting a concern for someone who should be there. The visitor wiped the sweat from his forehead, finally satiated. The meal seemed to have calmed the desperation of his stomach and restored some of his composure. While the guest caught his breath, the young man remained by the stove. He ensured there was enough food to keep that voracious hunger under control. The man examined a piece of jerky with appreciation. With his mood visibly improved after eating, he began to make small talk about the past. The protagonist listened attentively, capturing every word of the stranger while keeping his hands busy with kitchen tasks. The visitor confirmed his suspicions with a tone of approval. The young man, however, remained with his back turned, processing the information he had just received. Without wasting time on formalities, the man brought the food to his mouth, ready to continue his rustic meal while speaking. The young man turned to observe his peculiar guest. There was something in those words that awakened an old and disturbing memory. Suddenly, a realization hit the protagonist. The expression on his face hardened, transforming casual curiosity into intense and silent shock. The visitor, oblivious to the sudden tension, continued to chew the tough meat with vigor and nonchalance. His teeth crushed the food with brute force. The sound of chewing seemed to echo, filling the heavy silence that had formed in the cabin. As he savored the bite, the man looked up, lost in distant thoughts, perhaps recalling the same events that the young man now remembered. The protagonist's mind was transported to the past. He remembered an innocent conversation in childhood, questioning his own nature and destiny. In that memory, the little boy smiled naively, curious about the stories of corrupt nobles that permeated the world. The response from the woman who raised him, however, did not come lightly. Her gaze carried a deep sadness, as if she knew the weight those questions carried. The memory culminated in a solemn vision, a congregation gathered under the sacred light, united by bonds and oaths that transcended blood. The young man turned, capturing the seriousness in the visitor's words. That statement seemed to carry a weight he did not expect. The bearded man, now more relaxed, watched the host out of the corner of his eye. The atmosphere in the cabin subtly changed as the conversation flowed. Kjorn kept his expression neutral, studying the stranger. He waited cautiously to see where this dialogue would lead them. The visitor admitted that he had exaggerated the previous jokes. Realizing the breach of etiquette, he proposed that they finally make proper introductions. The protagonist's gaze sharpened with determination. He introduced himself as Kjorn, identifying himself only as a wanderer, without giving further details. The man put his hand to his head, caught off guard by the direct response. The young man's attitude seemed to have shattered his expectation. A wide, awkward smile appeared on the visitor's face. He scratched the back of his neck, trying to laugh at his own strangeness and ease the tension of the moment. Kjorn, however, just watched him with perplexity. The man's peculiar sense of humor left him unsure of exactly how to react. The visitor got up from the chair, adopting a more formal posture. He seemed determined to restart the interaction on the right foot. Turning fully to the young man, the man prepared to seal that encounter. The joking was over. Now the intention was respectful. He extended his calloused, open hand. It was a silent invitation to a greeting, a universal gesture of peace. With a genuine and welcoming smile, the man waited. He hoped that Kjorn would accept his offer of truce and friendship. The young man did not refuse. Their hands met in a firm grip, establishing a physical and symbolic connection between them. There, under the soft light of the cabin, the two sealed their introduction. The initial distrust gave way to a mutual understanding. With the protocol fulfilled, the meal remained on the table. The hearty dish awaited, now in a much more friendly environment. Dinner continued under the warm light of the lamp. The stranger and the young man shared the table, enjoying a moment of truce and hospitality. The protagonist kept the conversation light, showing genuine curiosity. His smile indicated that the visitor's presence was welcome, despite the circumstances. The man gestured casually, answering the questions with ease. He seemed relaxed, enjoying the momentary rest that had been offered to him. The response pleased the young man, who maintained his friendly expression. The initial tension of the encounter had completely dissipated during the meal. The visitor returned with a broad, satisfied smile. The food and company had clearly improved his mood after the hunger he had felt. However, silence eventually filled the room. The words ceased naturally as the moment of rest came to an end. Outside, the night gave way to dawn. The soft sunlight began to illuminate the window, signaling the start of a new day. With the arrival of morning, the man got up to leave. The young man remained seated for a moment, watching his guest prepare to leave. Before leaving, the visitor left a coin on the table with a firm touch. It was a silent payment for the food and shelter received. The protagonist got up to say goodbye formally. He observed the man's gesture with serenity, accepting the conclusion of that unusual encounter. At the door, the stranger looked back one last time. With a confident and enigmatic smile, he said goodbye before going on his way. The landscape was revealed under the clear morning sky. The village in the distance seemed peaceful, bathed in the daylight that covered the mountains. In the green fields, sheep grazed calmly. Everyday life in the countryside followed its natural and peaceful course. Suddenly, something caught the animals' attention. The sheep raised their heads in unison, alert to a nearby presence that interrupted their grazing. The young man emerged from the flock, now holding a shepherd's staff. He resumed his daily routine, guiding the sheep through the open fields. The young shepherd enjoyed the tranquility of the day, displaying a serene smile under the sunlight. He stroked the animal's head tenderly, a simple gesture that brought comfort amid the routine. The scene evoked an old memory. The day the hunter returned home triumphant, announcing his arrival to the little boy at the door. Back in the present, the protagonist walked among the sheep. His thoughts, however, became bitter as he reflected on the arrogance of the nobles. He stopped for a moment, letting out a tired sigh. Something in his mind or in the environment seemed to weigh on him. Meanwhile, on Hisari Hill, the experienced hunter cautiously advanced through the trees of the dense forest. The man suddenly stopped walking. He looked back, sensing that something in the atmosphere had changed. Before him, shattered tree stumps confirmed his suspicions. The presence of a monster was unmistakable in that place. He stood motionless before a large, scarred tree, analyzing the trail of destruction left by the creature. Just below, something different caught his attention. He observed a crystalline formation shining mysteriously on the forest floor. The hunter smiled slightly and relaxed his posture, believing for a moment that the danger wasn't what it seemed. However, that security vanished in an instant. His eyes widened in pure shock as he realized his fatal mistake. Driven by survival instinct, he quickly spun his body, trying to locate the threat emerging behind him. But the darkness had already revealed itself. A monstrous maw, full of teeth and blood, appeared ready to attack. A colossal claw descended with devastating force upon the hunter, who found himself defenseless against the beast's fury. An explosion of energy swept across the ground. The impact was violent, raising dust and debris around the combat area. The hunter watched the enemy's transformation with analytical eyes. He realized that the creature was not a common beast, but something capable of assuming a spectral form to avoid damage. To escape the lethal charge, the warrior propelled himself upwards. The beast attacked empty space, finding only the trace left by the human's jump. While spinning in the air, the veteran maintained absolute focus on his opponent. He used gravity to his advantage to strategically reposition himself. With a precise landing, he touched the ground before the monster. The man steadied himself, ready to counterattack before the creature recovered. He concentrated his mana, gathering pure energy between his hands. The intense glow indicated the preparation of a powerful spell. The magic was channeled directly into his blade. The sword crackled with golden electricity, becoming a weapon capable of wounding the supernatural. In a fluid motion, he fired a beam of concentrated energy. The attack cut through the air towards the target with devastating speed. The beam struck the beast head-on. The force of the magical impact collided against the monstrous form, creating a luminous shockwave. However, the creature was not destroyed. It liquefied, turning into a dark puddle on the ground to evade the fatal damage and resurface elsewhere. The hunter was stunned by the maneuver. He did not expect a monster to possess enough intelligence to nullify magic with its own sorcery. The shadow materialized again, now gigantic and menacing. This time, the beast's attention turned to the young man in the white coat who was in the way. The boy had no chance to defend himself. The creature's invisible claws struck him from the side, tearing his clothes and throwing him backwards violently. The veteran acted quickly, placing himself between the monster and the wounded companion. The young man clutched his bleeding flank, while the older one took the defensive vanguard. Sweat ran down the experienced warrior's face. He realized that the situation had become critical. Now he needed to fight not only to win, but to protect a life. The monstrous creature rose up, dominating the scene with its single green eye pulsing with malice. The beast's presence was suffocating, promising imminent annihilation. The veteran hunter, however, maintained his position. He channeled flames into his hand, prepared to defend his life and the boys at any cost. Suddenly, his combat instincts alerted him to an anomaly. Something subtle changed in the atmosphere around them. A nearby stone began to levitate gently, enveloped in a bluish aura, defying gravity without any logical explanation. The man looked back, surprised. That magical manifestation did not come from him, and it certainly wasn't the monster's doing. Shock took over his expression as he realized the true source of that sudden power. The phenomenon intensified rapidly. Several rocks began to float through the forest, responding to a silent call of arcane energy. The young man, who seemed helpless moments before, was now standing, enveloped in a storm of blue mana. The power emanated from him with overwhelming intensity. A confident smile curved the boy's lips. His gaze had changed completely. The hesitation gave way to a sharp determination. The beast, sensing the new threat, ignored the veteran and lunged violently towards the young mage. Even with death advancing towards him, the boy remained calm, coldly calculating his next move. The hunter watched, paralyzed and incredulous, as the fire in his hand seemed insignificant before that demonstration of power. The creature brought its sharp claw down like a guillotine, aiming to crush its opponent in a single devastating blow. The veteran shouted in despair, fearing that the young man would not have enough time to react to that brutal speed. However, a golden light exploded at the moment of impact, intercepting the attack with an overwhelming force. Magical energy flowed into the palm of his hand, concentrating into a focal point. The young man prepared to unleash all the power he had just awakened. With a sharp movement, he fired a cross-shaped blast of pure energy. The impact lit up the forest, aiming to obliterate the threat before him with brute force. However, the boy's expression quickly shifted from determination to doubt. He realized, with a cold sweat, that the attack did not have the devastating effect he expected. The veteran hunter shouted a desperate warning upon noticing that the creature remained standing. The offensive magic had failed to stop the monster's advance. The man yelled with utmost urgency, trying to snap the boy out of his shock. There was no time for hesitation against an enemy of that size. Ignoring the superficial damage, the beast lumbered towards the young man. The distance between them closed in a terrifying instant, with the monster ready to crush him. Even in the face of the brutal charge, the boy maintained his composure. He reached out again, instinctively seeking a new way to contain the enemy. The world around him seemed to slow down as his eyes glowed with a starlight. He accessed an even deeper reservoir of focus and power within himself. A sudden burst of energy erupted directly against the creature. The impact was visceral, colliding violently with the approaching monster. The young man was propelled backward by the force of his own attack, but kept his gaze fixed on the target. He seemed strangely calm amidst the chaos. The grandfather watched the scene completely stunned, unable to intervene. What his eyes witnessed defied all logic and experience he possessed. Shock paralyzed the veteran momentarily. He could hardly believe the magnitude and nature of the power that this simple shepherd was demonstrating. Energy crackled in the air with a sharp sound, distorting the space around it with its intensity. The environment vibrated with the preparation for the final blow. With a decisive surge, the boy unleashed a devastating shockwave at point-blank range. The blast repelled debris and the creature, creating a barrier of brute force. The extreme effort, however, took its immediate toll. As the dust settled, the young man looked exhausted and stunned, feeling the weight of that overwhelming power. The young man quickly slid backward, creating the necessary distance to prepare his counterattack. In the palm of his hand, he concentrated the magical energy until it took the form of a swirling sphere of fire. The giant beast roared before him, but the boy remained unwavering, illuminating the darkness with his ready magic. With steely determination, he raised his arm and aimed, deciding to end the confrontation at that instant. His feet planted on the ground, halting the movement abruptly to ensure the stability of the strike. He released the attack, propelling the mass of flames downward with the full weight of his body. The projectile hit the target squarely, exploding violently against the monstrous creature's face. The fire spread instantly, engulfing the monster in a vortex of searing destruction. The older man shouted, completely stunned by the violence and magnitude of that sudden power. Undeterred, the young man kept his arm extended, controlling the flames that danced around him. A mysterious glow took over his gaze. That clearly wasn't ordinary magic. The conflagration intensified, roaring as if it had a life of its own while consuming the enemy without mercy. The observer could hardly believe what he saw. The strength demonstrated by the boy defied any known logic. His eyes widened in pure astonishment, capturing every detail of that impossible event. Amidst the claws of smoke and the remnants of dissipated magic, the young man stood tall, solemn, and victorious. With the threat reduced to bones and flames, silence fell over the clearing. The boy and the grandfather remained still, separated only by the smoldering carcass of the beast. The young man reached out, feeling the density of the magic that still lingered in the air around him. He closed his eyes briefly, trying to calm his breathing and regain his composure after the burst of violence. The green energy, which had previously roared with ferocity, began to dissipate slowly like smoke in the wind. However, the boy still felt the power flowing. He tried to disperse the excess mana that was accumulating in his palm, fighting for control. Suddenly, a sharp sensation struck him, causing his pupil to contract in immediate reaction. A shockwave ran through his nervous system as if the magic itself was rewriting the pathways within his body. The impact was visceral. The boy widened his eyes, surprised by the intensity of the physical reaction that the spell provoked. Upon regaining his senses, the gravity of the situation weighed on him. The young man stood before his grandfather, exposed and vulnerable after revealing his true strength. He clenched his fist tightly, frustrated and tense. The boy lowered his head, mentally preparing himself for the consequences of his actions. The grandfather, however, remained silent. He watched his grandson's figure with a mixture of shock and solemn recognition. The old man's gaze narrowed, deeply analyzing the young man, as if he were reevaluating everything he knew about him. The protagonist stared at the palm of his hand, stunned. He could hardly believe that this devastating power had come from his own fingers. Hesitantly, he looked up at his grandfather, seeking to understand what that prolonged silence meant. To his surprise, the older man did not reprimand him. The grandfather put his hand to his chest and lowered his guard, showing a silent and relieved respect for what the boy had done. The young man felt his nervousness grow. Now that the immediate danger had passed, the weight of silent judgment remained over the power he had revealed. The grandfather, however, was dealing with his own pain. The wound on his arm throbbed intensely, a physical and brutal reminder of human fragility in the face of monsters. He held his injured limb, exhausted. The adrenaline dissipated, leaving only fatigue and the urgent need for medical attention in the cabin's refuge. The boy promptly prepared the supplies on the table. The silence between the two was thick as he organized what was needed to treat the elder's injuries. Trying to ease the tension, the young man commented casually. He hoped that the normalcy of the routine could ward off the heavy atmosphere that had settled after the battle. However, the response he received caused an immediate shock. His eyes widened as he realized that the conversation was taking a completely unexpected turn. The mention of a simple shepherd sounded strange in that context. The tranquility of life in the countryside now seemed like a facade for something much more complex. Sitting at the table, the atmosphere changed from medical care to interrogation. The grandfather seemed ready to reveal truths that had been kept hidden for too long. The boy observed the man in front of him with a new perspective. The familiar figure of his grandfather now carried an aura of mystery that demanded explanations. He kept his gaze steady, showing that he was no longer a naive child. He was ready to hear the truth, however harsh it might be. The silence returned briefly, heavy. The small wooden box on the table seemed to be the gravitational center of that difficult conversation. The older man finally broke the silence with a grave word. He began to talk about ancient conflicts, setting the stage for a painful story. The narrative transported the imagination to past eras. He described burning battlefields where armies clashed and the world was consumed by the fire of war. The grandfather continued his account with relentless seriousness. There was no room to embellish the past. He told the raw story of how the world came to be in that state. The young man absorbed every word with a mixture of fascination and fear. The story of that legendary conflict began to make sense in his mind, connecting the loose pieces. The memories of the battlefield brought images of shattered armor and lives lost amidst the chaos of war. However, the pain went far beyond combat comrades. He recalled the devastating loss of his own family on that fateful day. The memory of holding his wife's lifeless body still haunted him. It was the moment his world crumbled, marked by blood and mourning. Back in the present, the grandfather struggled to maintain his composure. The weight of those old memories still caused him cold sweats and visible anguish. The young man listened attentively, noticing the gravity in the elder's face. He understood that this story carried painful and important lessons. The man then changed the focus of the conversation. Scratching his head, he commented on the boy's abilities, recognizing his talent as a knight, but with reservations. The atmosphere in the room changed subtly. The veteran's attention was now entirely focused on the young man in front of him. Sitting with his feet bandaged, the boy awaited the rest of the analysis. He knew that this initial praise would be accompanied by a harsh reality or condition. He looked up, showing a mixture of curiosity and expectation. He was ready to hear what was really missing in his training or character. The grandfather got up from the table, walking around the cabin. His posture indicated that the history lesson was only beginning to deepen and take a new turn. The narrative expanded beyond the walls of that house. He began to explain the origin of the refuge where they lived and the walls that protected the city. The world outside was vast and dangerous. He described how humanity was cornered, forced to live in limited territories far from its origin. It wasn't just a military defeat, but a superior sentence. The gods themselves had rejected humans, expelling them from their sacred domains. That expulsion resulted in bloody wars and destruction. Humanity's past was forged in desperate battles for survival against overwhelming forces. The boy absorbed every word with seriousness. The story of his people revealed that the world was much more hostile and complex than he imagined. The man watched the boy with a slight smile, showing an experienced calm. He seemed to be waiting for the right moment to deepen the conversation. In the corner of the room, the weapons rested under the light of the window. The sword and staff remained silent, witnesses to the unfolding dialogue. The protagonist looked away to the horizon, displaying a confident smile. He seemed comfortable, momentarily ignoring the gravity of the situation. However, his expression quickly changed to confusion. The warrior in front of him brought up a crucial point that caught him off guard. The subject turned dark when they mentioned the origin of the Freyans. A visceral image of ancestral power and sacrifice emerged in the exposed narrative. The young man clenched his fist tightly upon hearing that. The tension in his hand revealed he was holding back his emotions regarding the story. The visitor, in turn, adopted a solemn posture. His face became shadowed as he prepared to describe the brutality of the war. The narrative evoked memories of a bloody battlefield. He described the tragic moment when lives were lost and bodies sustained amidst the chaos. The horror of that day was vividly recalled. The cry of despair and agony of a survivor echoed through the man's words. The boy was paralyzed, his eyes wide with shock. The raw, violent reality of those memories hit him with full force. Fear showed in his trembling gaze. The man questioned him deeply about the futility of answering blood with blood and the weight of regrets. The protagonist swallowed hard, feeling small before that imposing figure. He recalled the previous order to descend the hill and felt the weight of his choices. Uncertainty took over his mind. He wondered if he had made a serious mistake and if an apology was necessary at that moment. However, the man offered a reassuring smile. He recognized the young man's talent, predicting that his destiny would inevitably cross with that of the Zahar family. To conclude the lesson, the warrior placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. The gesture sealed a mutual understanding, accepting him despite his inexperience. The young man felt a sudden discomfort, realizing that the conversation was taking a more serious turn than he expected. Apprehension showed on his face. The visitor, however, maintained a calm smile, trying to ease the tension that his words might cause. But that look hid an unwavering firmness, focused entirely on the truth that needed to be conveyed at that moment. The boy, still uneasy, brought up the instruction he had previously received about having to leave that place and descend the hill. The man's response was direct and cutting. He stated that, regardless of the path chosen, the young man's destiny would eventually converge on the Zahar family. The mention of that specific name caught the boy off guard, leaving him stunned by the certainty with which the prophecy was spoken. The visitor paused briefly, preparing to reframe his thought and better clarify the situation. Regaining his composure, the young man waited in silence, processing the information while awaiting the conclusion of the reasoning. The man then turned away, ending the direct visual confrontation and allowing the silence of the field to fill the space between them. There was a resigned melancholy in his expression, as if he understood the weight of the burden being placed on the boy's shoulders. Noticing the mentor's hidden concern, the young man let out a confident smile, showing that he would not be overcome by fear. The visitor noticed the resilience in the boy's spirit and returned the gesture, approving of the courage shown in the face of an uncertain future. The decisive conversation had taken place there, in the courtyard of the isolated cabin, where the destiny of both now seemed intertwined. The daylight filtered softly through the window, illuminating the silent interior of the residence they headed towards. Once inside, the visitor's expression became somber again. It was time to face reality, head on. The young man listened attentively, absorbing every word spoken by the visitor. The conversation was taking an unexpected and serious turn. In the silence of the cabin, the two discussed the nature of that power. The environment seemed small for the magnitude of the subject the man was bringing up. The visitor raised his hand, listing crucial facts. He needed to be didactic so that the boy would understand the rules of that world. However, the protagonist frowned, skeptical. The explanation seemed too simplistic for something that should be complex and dangerous. The man, noticing the doubt, confirmed his statement with a firm gesture. The answer was absolute and left no room for uncertainty. He mentioned revista and a shocking truth. Certain abilities were innate. Power could arise and be used without the need for any formal training. The boy gestured, incredulous. He was trying to rationalize how someone could control such force purely by instinct, without prior study. The revelation left him stunned. That contradicted everything he thought he knew about the effort required to master such arts. Tired of just talking, the man got up from his chair. It was time to move from theory to practice and prove his point. All attention turned to the simple mug on the table. The water inside rested calm and cold. The visitor stood before the object, preparing himself. The young man watched from his place, tense, awaiting the demonstration of what had been said. The man extended his open hand over the cup. The air began to vibrate, and a palpable energy emanated from his palm towards the object. Instantly, the water reacted. The liquid began to boil and bubble violently under the influence of that invisible pressure. The protagonist watched, paralyzed. The visitor generated intense heat and controlled the temperature without needing any external source of fire. The young man's mind lit up with the possibility. He finally understood the concept. It was about the raw ability to create and project flames at will. The visitor smiled enthusiastically, clenching his fist to demonstrate his conviction. He seemed to vibrate as he explained the raw strength needed for that kind of feat. The young man, however, remained skeptical. He questioned the logic behind magic beasts needing such an ability, seeking to understand the principle, not just the effect. The conversation continued in the quiet of the cabin. While the world outside continued on its course, within those walls, a theoretical lesson on the nature of magic was being debated. The protagonist pondered the explanation. He absorbed the information, trying to connect the dots between the legends he knew and the reality presented to him. The atmosphere in the room subtly shifted. The boy watched his mentor, realizing that the casual conversation was about to take a more serious and practical turn. The visitor stood up and moved away from the table. His change in posture indicated that the time for questions was over. Something was about to happen. The young man closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. He decided to stop questioning and start feeling, seeking to internalize the concept he had just heard. Heat began to emanate from his face. Concentrating intensely, he tried to replicate the sensation of the energy, physically manifesting what was previously just theory. The mentor noticed the change immediately. His relaxed expression disappeared, replaced by an attentive and vigilant look at the boy's reaction. An invisible pressure began to fill the environment. The air around them became heavy, swirling in subtle currents that betrayed the presence of mana. The man felt the air density increase dramatically. A drop of sweat trickled down his face as he witnessed the raw potential awakening before his eyes. The tension became palpable. The visitor swallowed hard, understanding that this was no longer a simple lesson, but the beginning of something dangerous. The entire environment began to vibrate. Reality seemed to distort around them, with the energy overflowing and affecting the very stability of the room. The young man stood up, enveloped in a distorted aura. He had successfully accessed the flow of energy, and his body was reacting violently to the newfound power. He looked at his own hand, feeling the strength run through his limbs. As he clenched his fist, the protagonist finally understood the physical sensation of that power. The mentor displayed a satisfied smile on his face. He knew that the moment of departure had finally arrived, and he did not intend to delay it any longer. Without hesitation, the older man passed by the young man, signaling with his body posture that there was no more time to waste in that place. The protagonist remained silent for a moment. The reality of that sudden decision weighed on his shoulders as he processed the imminent change. With an almost theatrical courtesy, the mentor placed his hand on his chest. He seemed to offer a formal farewell, maintaining his composure in the face of the situation. The villager, however, was taken aback by the shock. He realized, incredulously, that the pair had liquidated their essential goods and were about to abandon the village for good. The young man was already properly equipped for the journey. With the heavy backpack on his back and the travel outfit, he awaited the outcome of that tense interaction. Faced with the heavy atmosphere, the boy just let out a nervous and resigned laugh. There were no arguments that could soften the impact of that abrupt farewell. The villagers stopped, stunned. The news of the departure caught them completely off guard, leaving the group paralyzed in the face of the traveler's audacity. The initial confusion soon gave way to disbelief. One of the larger men seemed unable to accept that they would be left behind in that way, searching for words that didn't come. Frustration took over the face of the oldest villager. He gritted his teeth, feeling betrayed and powerless in the face of the pair's unilateral decision to leave. The sound of coins clinking inside a bag ended the discussion. The final payment was delivered, sealing the transaction and cutting off any remaining ties with the residents. With the financial matter resolved, master and apprentice turned their backs on the village. They walked determinedly towards the horizon, leaving behind the inhabitants' complaints. The young man kept his eyes fixed on the path ahead. There was a mixture of doubt and acceptance in his expression as he walked away from his old home. The older man, on the other hand, seemed light and calm. He walked with the satisfaction of someone who had executed his plan exactly as he wanted, without remorse. A subtle smile curved his lips. The freedom of the open road and the success of the negotiation were, after all that mattered at that moment. The two stopped at the edge of the forest, where the known path ended and the rest of the world began. The moment of departure had finally arrived. The mentor looked at his new pupil, displaying an expression of silent encouragement. He knew that leaving home required courage, and seemed to approve of the boy's posture. The boy adjusted his backpack on his shoulders and returned the look with confidence. Despite the uncertainty of the future, he was determined to follow that path. The older man smiled, satisfied, closing his eyes briefly as if sealing that silent commitment between master and apprentice. The young man allowed himself a smile back, feeling the excitement outweigh the fear. He was ready to leave his old life behind. The mentor turned his back and began to walk, his imposing figure leading the way. The boy remained standing for a moment, just watching the one who would guide his destiny. However, as he watched, a sudden understanding struck the young man. The weight of what he was abandoning became clear only at that final moment. His mind was flooded with the memory of simpler days in the fields. He recalled the maternal figure who had guided him during childhood, a piece that was now in the past. The boy watched the man's back move away, feeling the distance grow between his past and his future. He hesitated briefly before taking the next step. The journey continued, and soon the soft forest floor gave way to an arid land. Time passed, transforming the landscape around them. They entered a desolate territory, where strong winds howled through rocky ravines. The outside world revealed itself to be vast and merciless. The protagonist, now dressed to withstand the harsh environment, walked alone through the vastness. The road had become a test of physical and mental endurance. He raised his hand to shield his face from the sand and constant wind. The young traveler seemed to be looking for something specific in the desolation. His eyes narrowed, focused, and alert. The naivety of his departure had disappeared, replaced by an iron determination. Standing amidst the rock formations, he surveyed the horizon. The young man now needed to choose which direction to take in that desert of possibilities. The path was blocked by hooded figures. Their leader, a man marked by scars and an eye patch, waited with a defiant stance. The young man stopped short, surprised. That sudden ambush in the middle of nowhere was something he didn't expect to encounter so soon. The siege closed quickly. Armed men surrounded the cart, cutting off any possible escape route for the travelers. The firm step of one of the aggressors broke the safe distance. The hostile intent was clear even before any words were spoken. One of the bandits stepped forward, displaying a predatory grin. He saw only easy prey before him, ignoring the real danger. The protagonist, however, remained impassive. He faced the provocation with a bored look, coldly assessing his opponents. The metallic sound of swords being drawn filled the desert silence. The threat turned into imminent violence on all sides. Even surrounded, the young man smiled. The confidence in his own strength was evident, contrasting with the bandit's aggression behind him. The gang leader raised his weapon, amused by the situation. To him, this seemed like just another routine looting. A sharp blade was pressed against the young man's neck. The danger became tangible, demanding an immediate reaction. The one-eyed man watched carefully. Something in his victim's attitude made him hesitate, as if he noticed an unexpected detail. The young man's mind wandered to a calmer moment. He remembered sitting at the table of a cabin, far from that scorching heat. Magic flowed casually in that refuge. Fire danced between the visitor's fingers, warming the drink in a gesture of precise control. Silence reigned in that place. The man stood up, his posture indicating that the time for conversation was over. Back to the reality of combat, the protagonist prepared himself. With a defiant smile, he was ready to demonstrate that he was not a helpless victim. The young man watched the mockery around him with an impassive gaze. There was no fear in his expression, just a cold assessment of the threat. The bandits laughed loudly, ridiculing the traveler's stance. They mocked the idea that this lone boy could be some kind of dangerous mage. Ignoring the insults, the protagonist simply opened his hand. He let the object he was holding fall, initiating his silent counterattack. A violent burst of wind erupted from the impact. The sudden force swept the aggressors away, throwing them back in a whirlwind of dust and chaos. The boy noted the efficiency of his method. He realized that using simple projectiles imbued with magic was much faster and more potent than traditional conjurations. The dust began to settle over the battlefield. The robbers, stunned and coughing, tried to understand what had just hit them. The young mage didn't hesitate. With a fluid movement, he manipulated the liquid from his canteen, making the water levitate under his command. The matter obeyed his will instantly. The suspended water froze, transforming into a sharp and deadly ice spear tip. He summoned multiple projectiles around him. The traveler now revealed himself to be a lethal force, ready to punish those who underestimated him. Terror took over the face of one of the bandits. The previous arrogance disappeared, replaced by the belated realization that they had chosen the wrong victim. The ice shards were fired mercilessly. They hit their targets with brutal precision, piercing defenses and staining the enemy's clothes with blood. The protagonist kept his hand raised, controlling the magic with ease. He seemed to reflect on how that direct approach saved time and effort. The gang leader fell to his knees, completely overwhelmed. Faced with that overwhelming power, his only reaction was to extend his hand, trembling and helpless. However, the battle was not yet won. The remaining bandits, driven by desperation and fury, launched a coordinated surprise attack. A firm step echoed on the sandy ground. The young man steadied his stance, ready to crush the last resistance without retreating an inch. The dust settled over the destruction. The young mage remained standing in the center of the devastation he had just created, surrounded by the wreckage of the combat. The leader of the bandits stared at the scene, paralyzed. Terror replaced any trace of arrogance on his face as he realized the disparity in power. To the fallen man, the the young man's figure seemed monumental. He stood against the light, casting an oppressive shadow over his defeated opponent. Without the strength to continue, the bandit collapsed to his knees. He cowered before the mage, awaiting his fate in total submission. The protagonist, however, showed no anger. A calm and indecipherable smile appeared on his face as he watched the surrendered enemy. His eyes, however, remained cold. There was a frightening clarity in his gaze, assessing the life that was now in his hands. The bandit's body reacted instinctively to the mortal danger. Uncontrollable tremors took over as fear completely consumed him. Upon noticing the man's dread, the young man's expression subtly changed. That scene of submission awakened a specific memory in his mind. The highwayman, still trembling, awaited final judgment. The silence between the two became heavy, laden with expectation. A suspended drop of water caught the fallen man's attention. Time seemed to slow down as the tension reached its peak. Suddenly, the face of a past mentor surfaced in the young man's memories. It was a serious expression, marked by the gravity of an ancient teaching. He recalled the preparations for a departure. At that moment, while supplies were being organized, crucial words were spoken. The memory focused on a sword left on the table. That object carried the weight of a fundamental lesson about the nature of violence and responsibility. The teaching echoed clearly. The mercy granted to a villain could cost the lives of innocents in the future. To spare evil was to risk good. With the memory fresh in his mind, the young man tilted his head. His smile returned, now laden with the certainty of the lethal decision he needed to make. Firm steps marked the beginning of a long journey. The young man left the scene of the conflict behind, advancing with determination across the arid terrain. The road ahead was vast and lonely. Carrying only the essentials on his back, he crossed the desert landscape, moving further and further away from his starting point. The sun beat down hard, but he stayed focused. Despite the visible fatigue, his eyes remained fixed on the horizon, guided by a clear purpose. The image of his mentor remained in his memory. The old warrior had watched his departure with an intense expression, aware of the dangers that awaited him. The traveler stopped at the top of the hill, allowing himself a moment of pause. Before the immensity of the sky and clouds, he prepared for what he would see next. An expression of recognition and admiration appeared on his face. The reality before his eyes confirmed the rumors that had brought him there. Below him, an imposing city stretched out, dominated by a large central fortress. He realized that he had finally found the place he was looking for. Upon entering civilization, the silence of the desert was replaced by the sound of everyday lives. Children and adults passed by, oblivious to the presence of the newcomer. The young man walked through the bustling market streets. His solitary figure and traveler's clothes attracted curious glances from the locals as he passed. A monumental structure rose above the other buildings. The solemn architecture of that place suggested a religious or governmental importance that dominated the urban landscape. He stopped in the middle of the road, absorbing the atmosphere around him. The protagonist felt the weight of the gazes and the vibration of a city that never stopped. His attention turned to a nearby merchandise stall. Before the fresh fruit and attentive merchant, he saw an opportunity for interaction. With a simple and polite gesture, the young man greeted the vendor. He sought to establish friendly contact in that unfamiliar environment. The man on the other side of the counter, with marks of experience on his face, returned the attention. He seemed receptive to the stranger's approach. The merchant, visibly annoyed, made a brusque gesture with his hand to wave the customer away. The man's patience seemed short that day. The young man with white hair was disconcerted by the sudden hostility. He did not expect such a reaction just by attempting a simple interaction. Ignoring the other's bad mood, the protagonist pointed to the fresh fruit on the stand. He only needed basic supplies. The boy then offered some coins, questioning if the amount would be enough. His posture remained polite despite the previous rudeness. The payment was accepted, and the coin fell into the outstretched palm. The commercial transaction was completed without further words. Later, the traveler spotted a weathered wooden sign. The place promised both drink and lodging for those arriving in the city. Upon entering the establishment, he was immediately greeted by a radiant attendant. She welcomed him with a wide and inviting smile. The protagonist stopped in the lobby, hearing unexpected compliments about his appearance. The reception there was drastically different from what he had at the market. The girl clasped her hands together enthusiastically, delighted with the presence of the new guest. Her sympathy seemed to overflow as she watched him. Without being carried away by the flattery, the young man extended a small bag of coins. He preferred to secure his place with gold rather than with charm. The attendant observed the payment offered, assessing the weight of the bag. Her attention turned entirely to the proposed transaction. The traveler maintained a neutral and firm expression. He was only waiting for confirmation that the amount would cover his needs. Upon holding the coin, the woman's face lit up with genuine satisfaction. The shine of the gold seemed to be the true source of her joy. She then gestured across the room, adopting a more pragmatic tone. The girl made it clear that, in that place, nothing was obtained for free. The room was filled with barrels and stocked supplies. Everything there was available, as long as the price was duly paid. The young man looked up from his drink, surprised by the sudden interaction. The question hung in the air, demanding his immediate attention amidst his rest. The girl leaned over the table, showing genuine and friendly curiosity. She seemed eager to strike up a conversation with the newcomer, ignoring any formality. The boy kept a neutral expression, listening attentively to what she had to say, even though he was still processing the sudden familiarity of her approach. Her enthusiasm was evident. Her eyes sparkled as she shared local stories, trying to impress or inform the lone traveler. The conversation flowed between the two in the empty hall. That moment of connection seemed to offer a brief respite from the solitude of his journey. She fervently explained the popular belief that facing monsters could transform an ordinary person, granting them extraordinary magical powers. Suddenly, a heavy hand landed on the protagonist's shoulder. The firm touch abruptly interrupted the tranquil moment. A burly man appeared behind him, exuding a dominant presence. The monster hunter, known as Maidan, displayed a smile that mixed confidence and arrogance. The atmosphere in the inn changed instantly. The girl watched the scene with apprehension as the newcomer physically imposed himself on the seated young man. With loud laughter, the man patted the boy vigorously. He treated him with a forced and uncomfortable intimacy, ignoring the boy's visible discomfort. The protagonist finally turned to face the source of the disturbance. He remained calm, turning his body to understand who was approaching him in that manner. The young woman sighed, resting her face in her hand with dismay. The rude interruption clearly bothered her, suggesting that the presence of those men was a habitual nuisance. Midan wasn't alone. His companions watched the scene from just behind. The group displayed malicious smiles, surrounding the environment with an aura of numerical superiority. The boy stared at the group, his expression revealing a mixture of confusion and indifference. He didn't seem to understand the reason for so much sudden attention. The hunter maintained a wide, fixed smile on his face. He seemed to expect a specific reaction from the young man, enjoying his own intimidating performance. The young man held out a heavy bag towards the man. It was a calculated offer to end the conflict before it began. Midan weighed the bribe in his hand, assessing its value. The mercenary seemed to consider whether the gold was worth more than the fun of a fight. The protagonist remained impassive, awaiting the decision. His expression showed no fear, only the practicality of someone who wanted to solve a problem. A greedy smile formed on the man's lips. The amount was enough to buy his cooperation, at least for now. Later, in the solitude of his rented room, the silver-haired young man lay down. The night was quiet, but he didn't allow himself to fully relax. He let out a deep sigh, staring at the dark ceiling. Rest was necessary, but his mind continued to work, anticipating his next steps. His backpack rested ready in a corner, perfectly packed. He didn't intend to stay there for long. Suddenly, sparks of bluish magical energy danced between his fingers. The arcane power responded to his silent call. The young man sat up in bed, alert. The atmosphere in the room changed when he decided it was time to move. His mind briefly wandered to a distant memory, He saw himself walking through an arid land alongside his master. The older man watched him with a look of approval and wisdom. There was an important lesson being conveyed in that moment from the past. In the memory, the protagonist smiled, absorbing the teachings with confidence. Those days of training shaped who he was now. Back in the present, he concentrated a large amount of mana in his hand. The blue light enveloped the doorknob, magically unlocking the mechanism. With silent movements, he opened a crack in the door. The young man peered into the hallway, checking if the path was clear. His gaze became sharp and penetrating. Stealth was essential, and he was ready for any obstacle that arose in the darkness. Lena appeared at the room door with a radiant and inviting smile. The young man recognized the maid immediately. The protagonist stared at her in silence, surprised by the sudden visit at that time of night and trying to understand her intentions. She tried a seductive approach, but the boy's mind went straight to the sanitary dangers and common diseases in that type of profession. He coldly rejected the advance, citing the risks of contagion if he were careless, which immediately killed the mood. The young man then understood the harsh reality of that place. Survival in the city required sacrifices he hadn't considered before. Lena, however, insisted and approached, trying to read his reactions. The boy realized that there, even casual conversations and information had a hidden price. The realization that the city was driven purely by financial interest left him with a feeling of comical resignation. The girl, in turn, was paralyzed and confused by the pragmatic and unexpected response she received. That situation brought back memories of a distant past, reminding him of the screams and harsh lessons of his former mentor. He recalled how he used to listen to those sermons with boredom and indifference during his travels through the open fields. Frustrated at not getting what she wanted, Lena descended the inn stairs visibly annoyed and empty-handed. Alone again, the protagonist lay down on the bed, but remained alert under the dim light of the lamp. His eyes remained open and fixed on nothing. He knew the night was not over yet. Heavy footsteps echoed on the old wood of the staircase. A group of ill-intentioned men were climbing towards the hallway. Upon hearing the approach of the intruders, the young man felt no fear. Instead, an amused smile appeared on his face. He was waiting for this. The young man suddenly opened his eyes, awakening with the clear light of day. The image of the hunter Maidan and his unwavering confidence still echoed in his mind. A smile of satisfaction appeared on his lips as he recalled the recent events. Lying in bed, the protagonist felt refreshed and optimistic for what was to come. Later, he headed to the local guild building, which stood out in the city's architecture. Upon entering the premises, he approached the counter where an employee promptly offered assistance. The young man stopped before the counter, maintaining a calm posture as he prepared to speak. The receptionist waited patiently, observing the client with professional attention. For a moment, the young man's mind wandered to a memory of his mentor caring for an animal. He recalled the peaceful times in the countryside, where he watched the old man sitting among the sheep. That memory brought a melancholic look to his face, connecting the past to his current goal. Returning to reality, he slid a sheet of paper over the wood of the counter. The young man held the document firmly, presenting his request to the attendant. On the paper, there was a rustic drawing of a black-winged creature, surrounded by specific annotations. The employee examined the peculiar sketch, preparing his pen to register the request. The young man maintained a firm and confident look. He knew exactly the value of the information he was about to deliver. The image of the beast he had hunted was grotesque and violent, a vivid reminder of the monstrosity that inhabited the world. The receptionist, still oblivious to the gravity of the situation, prepared to analyze the request as he would with any other. The young man slid the paper over the counter. The drawing displayed a specific creature, detailed with precise annotations. As the employee read the report, the guild's atmosphere seemed calm, but tension began to form in that corner of the hall. The mustached man frowned. What was described there seemed unlikely for an adventurer of that appearance. However, the reality of that predator was much more terrifying than any sketch could suggest. The physical proof was revealed. The black bird lay dead, with a fatal and clean wound piercing its chest. The receptionist swallowed hard, cold sweat running down his face as he realized that the boy was not lying. Other employees approached to examine the carcass. The protagonist watched the commotion with an indifferent calm, awaiting the verdict. He remained impassive, showing no pride or surprise, just waiting for the conclusion of the business. The atmosphere changed drastically. While an assistant ran in panic to warn the superiors, the receptionist tried to maintain composure before the young man. The payment was delivered hastily. The employee insisted that the young man take the money and go rest, eager to end the encounter. As soon as the young man walked away, the team focused on the real treasure. The creature's blade wings were intact, a spoil of inestimable value. The receptionist realized, stunned, that this boy possessed a lethal skill far beyond what he seemed. The young man remained still in the guild hall. The man in front of him watched him, silently assessing the presence of the one who had brought proof of the hunt. The employees couldn't hide their shock. Cold sweat dripped as they tried to reconcile the boy's harmless appearance with the terrifying feat he had just reported. The protagonist, however, remained impassive. He didn't seem to notice or care about the fear and reverence that his strength aroused in others. Soon after, the tension gave way to a more immediate reward. A lavish table was prepared, filled with meats, cheeses, and hot soup. The attendant presented the banquet with enthusiasm. The smell of freshly prepared food filled the environment, inviting after a long journey. The boy ate heartily, savoring every bite. The seriousness from before momentarily vanished, replaced by the simple satisfaction of a good meal. While drinking, however, his mind wandered far away. Even during rest, his thoughts returned to the reason for his journey and his progress. He recalled the training in the forest, visualizing the flow of energy he had learned to manipulate. The memory of using his aura on small creatures surfaced. Those experiments had been crucial. The young man internally acknowledged that, thanks to those constant practices, his power had undeniably grown. He raised his hand, observing it as if he could see the strength flowing beneath his skin. The certainty of his evolution filled him with a silent confidence. Suddenly, his eyes narrowed. The moment of introspection was interrupted when something subtle captured his immediate attention. The waitress noticed the change in his expression. She stopped what she was doing, surprised by the sudden intensity in the young man's gaze. Silence hung over the table. A robust man, possibly the cook, approached to check if the peculiar customer had enjoyed his meal. The man wiped the sweat from his brow, relieved. He exchanged a look with the attendant, impressed by how quickly the young man had devoured everything. Satisfied, the boy got up from the bench. Without saying an unnecessary word, he turned his back to the table, ready to resume his journey. A rough hand suddenly grabbed his clothes, interrupting his departure. Physical aggression seemed to be the only language those men knew. 3 figures surrounded the young man, displaying malicious and confident smiles. They believed they had found an easy target, completely ignoring the white-haired boy's unwavering calm. The protagonist didn't flinch. His keen senses picked up the movement around him, anticipating the violence even before it materialized. The first blow was launched with brutality. The impact echoed through the room, but the collision wasn't what the aggressors expected. The young man dodged with impressive fluidity. The attacker, caught off guard by the absence of a target, lost his balance and stumbled awkwardly across the room. With a theatrical gesture, the protagonist clasped his hands in a false prayer. He openly mocked the intimidation attempt, offering sarcasm instead of fear. The provocation wounded the bandit's pride. Enraged at being ridiculed, the man threw a heavy punch, shouting insults as he tried to hit the boy's face. The young man dodged minimally and counterattacked with surgical precision. His palm struck the opponent's chin, interrupting the offensive with a single decisive movement. As the first one fell defeated, a second aggressor advanced. Desperate, he raised a wooden bench, trying to use the object to crush the protagonist. The attack was useless. The young man intercepted the furniture in the air with his bare hand, stopping the violent blow as if it weighed nothing. The attacker's arrogance turned into immediate panic. The protagonist held the man's face with crushing pressure, instilling terror through his cold gaze. With a firm push, he launched the man away. The aggressor collapsed to the ground, groaning in pain, while the young man remained standing, untouched and dominant. The girl who was watching everything couldn't contain her reaction. A smile of relief and admiration appeared on her face as she saw how quickly the situation was resolved. The defeat was absolute. Humiliated and sore, the men quickly lined up, bowing in deep submission to beg forgiveness for the offense committed. The protagonist watched the scene with indifference. He accepted the outcome silently, ready to leave that place and continue on his way. The aggressors recognized total defeat. They bowed before the young man, demonstrating absolute submission to avoid more severe punishments. Cold sweat ran down the men's faces. They realized too late that they had severely underestimated their opponent and now feared the consequences. The leader of the gang, however, raised his head. He needed to resolve that humiliating situation before the young man decided to continue the attack. In his closed hand, he firmly gripped something, preparing to make a material offering. The man extended a small bag of coins. The protagonist watched the gesture with indifference, assessing the attempt at compensation. It was a payment for peace. The bandit offered the money urgently, hoping it would be enough to buy the mage's forgiveness. The young man stared at the man, pondering whether he would accept that bribe as an excuse for the insolence of the previous attack. Noticing the hesitation, the aggressor forced a friendly smile, desperately trying to transform the hostility into a casual interaction. Later, the city stretched out under the daylight, oblivious to the small conflicts resolved in the shadows of its establishments. The protagonist walked outside, feeling the wind. He had left the place, but his mind remained stuck on the recent events. It wasn't the victory or the money that held his attention, but rather the conversation that took place shortly after the surrender. He remembered sitting with the man in the tavern. The atmosphere had changed from physical confrontation to an exchange of information. The bandit, now cooperative, mentioned something specific during the conversation, a detail that he considered just a rumor. However, upon hearing those words, the young man's attention instantly focused on a crucial point. The revelation hit him hard, awakening a sudden and alarming understanding about his current situation. A figure descended rapidly through the trees, landing with a firm impact on the forest floor. The arrival was sudden and controlled. The young man examined the trunk of a nearby tree. The deep claw marks in the wood revealed the passage of something dangerous and strong. He stood up, keeping his guard up as he assessed the environment. The silence around him seemed unnatural. A few feet ahead, the protagonist found the trace of violence. A man lay dead, leaning against a tree and covered in blood. The victim's expression was frozen in absolute terror. Life had left his body brutally and suddenly. The white-haired boy observed the scene with analytical coldness. He remained silent, trying to understand what had occurred. His eyes focused on the details of the massacre. The death seemed to have been caused by something that did not hesitate to kill. Coins lay scattered on the blood-stained ground, ignored by the attacker. That confirmed that the motive for the attack was not robbery. The protagonist crouched down, intrigued by the situation. The absence of looters made the scene even more suspicious. Suddenly, the funereal silence was broken. One of the bodies on the ground moved subtly, emitting a gurgling sound. The young man turned immediately, surprised. He realized that not everyone there was dead yet. The survivor coughed violently, spitting blood as he tried to speak. The pain and shock were evident on his wounded face. However, a wet, rhythmic chewing sound interrupted any attempt at communication. Something was feeding nearby. The protagonist looked away towards the end of the path. On another corpse, a small shadow continued its meal, oblivious to their presence. The creature turned, revealing its monstrous nature. What looked like a harmless animal displayed red eyes and fangs stained with fresh blood. The young man felt a hostile presence suddenly rising behind him. From the top of the trees, the creature jumped in a rapid dive, aiming to hit him by surprise. He barely had time to react, shocked by the speed of that stealthy attack. The animal landed in front of him. Despite its harmless appearance, the aura it emanated was dangerous. The protagonist didn't wait to see what would happen and initiated an immediate defensive movement. Rotating his body with precision, he prepared a counterattack while dodging. His fist advanced, releasing a discharge of bluish energy directly against the small opponent. The blow connected with force, firing a shockwave that pushed the beast back. The creature was thrown violently, colliding and bouncing against the ground due to the impact. The boy remained focused, analyzing whether the attack had had the desired effect. However, the animal dug its paws into the ground, using its claws to break the forced recoil. Ignoring the damage, the beast launched itself back into the attack, now with much greater ferocity. The creature's gaze locked onto him with a murderous intensity, emanating pure bloodlust. In the blink of an eye, the monster disappeared, moving so fast that the young man lost track of it. The beast reappeared laterally, skidding across the terrain with an agility that defied logic. The young man dodged agilely, narrowly escaping the beast's reach. The creature, despite its appearance, remained relentless in its pursuit. The monster growled, feeling the impact of the last confrontation. Blood dripped from its jaw, but the pain seemed only to fuel its wild fury. Both landed almost simultaneously. The protagonist took advantage of the moment to create distance, assessing his opponent's stance. He used the trunk of a tree to break his momentum. The speed of combat required instant reflexes to maintain control in the dense forest. The creature wasted no time and counterattacked. With explosive force, it propelled itself against the wood, shattering the tree bark to gain speed. It launched itself through the air like a living projectile. Its eyes locked onto the target with a predatory intensity, ignoring any instinct for self-preservation. The monster ricocheted between the trees in an erratic pattern. With each jump, it became more difficult to predict the direction of its next lethal attack. The forest trembled with the violence of the final clash. A cloud of dust and debris rose, momentarily obscuring the result of that frantic exchange of blows. In the center of the devastated clearing, the beast stopped. It let out a high-pitched sound, searching for the opponent who seemed to have disappeared into the fog of combat. Silence returned, broken only by the sound of falling drops. The wound caused by the young man finally began to take its toll, draining the animal's strength. The creature's breathing became heavy and uneven. It collapsed, exhausted, its vitality rapidly fading along with the blood on the ground. Firm footsteps emerged from the dissipating smoke. The young man approached calmly, demonstrating absolute control over the situation. The battle was over. The monster lay still and defeated at the boy's feet, who coldly observed the result of his technique. Without hesitation, the protagonist reached out towards the fallen body. There was something about that creature that needed to be checked or collected. An intense energy erupted from his body, responding to his command. The power flowed around him, indicating that he was ready to use what he had just conquered. A sudden surge of energy ran through the young man's body, awakening an immediate reaction of surprise in his eyes. In the forest, he found a badly injured man leaning against a tree. The stranger, with difficulty, recognized the boy's magical nature. The protagonist watched the scene in silence, assessing the gravity of the situation before his eyes. Pain and relief mixed as tears began to stream down the fallen man's bloodied face. The memory of that near death and despair was still vivid in the warrior's mind. In the present, however, that same man displayed a peaceful smile, grateful to have survived the worst. Sitting face to face in the tavern, the two conversed calmly, recalling the events that forged their alliance. The young man with white hair spoke seriously, seeking to clarify the obscure points of that story. On the other side of the table, his companion listened patiently, with his drink resting untouched in front of him. The boy touched his chin, thoughtfully. The information received required careful reflection before any decision. The landscape outside, vast and covered in mist, awaited the next steps of their journey. Before leaving for good, the young man stood alone before 3 simple tombs erected in the clearing. He looked back one last time, displaying a serene expression of someone who had accepted the cycle of life and death. Without further hesitation, the mage walked away from the memorial stones, leaving the resting place behind. He joined the group waiting in the city. Together, they walked through the bustling streets, ready for the next stage of the adventure. The young man stopped, completely stunned as he finally reached his destination. The reputation of the city of Murray did not do justice to the reality his eyes witnessed. Before him unfolded a majestic urbanization, with an imposing castle in the background and geometric gardens that denoted a wealth and order far beyond what he knew. However, access to that refuge was not free. A crowd of travelers gathered at the entrance, forming a slow and bureaucratic line to pass through the gates. Sentries armed with spears rigorously monitored the flow of people, ensuring that only those properly authorized or searched could enter the city. The protagonist took his place in line, waiting patiently behind other hooded travelers, watching the slow pace of the procession. Suddenly, the monotony of waiting was broken. He noticed a change in the environment, something that made him interrupt his thoughts and sharpen his senses. A man just ahead lost his composure, shouting aggressively and pointing his finger with an expression of revulsion, creating an unnecessary commotion. The hostility was directed at a fragile-looking boy who cowered before the cruel insults about his condition, unable to defend himself. But the protagonist's focus soon shifted from that regrettable scene to something much larger, a gigantic tower, embraced by vegetation, that dominated the horizon. He raised his head, feeling tiny before that colossal structure. It was, without a doubt, the place he had heard so much about on his journey. A mixture of nervousness and determination took over him. That landmark represented the next crucial step in his quest, and he was ready to face it. As he approached the entrance to the tower, he came across ornate double doors, guarded by two men who blocked the way with a firm stance. Meanwhile, inside, a young woman with a bold smile showed satisfaction, giving a thumbs up with unwavering confidence. She seemed to be in the middle of an important conversation with a man of noble bearing, discussing matters that seemed to amuse her. The man, however, showed a genuine reaction of surprise, as if her words or the current situation had revealed something he did not expect. The young woman with reddish hair made a pensive sound, drawing attention to herself. There was a gleam of amusement in her confident posture. A mischievous smile curved her lips. She seemed to know exactly the chaotic impact her next words would have. Suddenly, an overwhelming pressure exploded through the hall. The intensity of her presence manifested physically, surprising everyone in the room with a shockwave. She stared with a predatory intensity. Her eyes glowed, showing that she spoke with complete seriousness and fervor. The white-haired man was paralyzed. The cold sweat and the expression of disbelief revealed that he was caught completely off guard by the situation. The shock was visible in his eyes. The reality of that sudden interaction seemed difficult to process at that moment. Amidst the golden aura that filled the room, she did the unthinkable. Without any hesitation, the young woman proposed to him in front of everyone. The force of that declaration was so potent that it knocked down the nearby servants. The absurdity of the situation had an almost physical weight on the onlookers. The energy slowly dissipated across the ornate ceiling. The momentary chaos gave way to a tense calm in the luxurious environment. The nobleman let out a deep sigh, trying to regain his composure. He closed his eyes, seeking strength to deal with that eccentric behavior. However, her smile did not falter. The girl seemed pleased with herself, amused by the reaction she had provoked. She gestured with her gloved hands, vibrating with anticipation. Her anxiety was palpable as she waited for an immediate response. The man just stared at her with an exhausted and lifeless look. All his formality contrasted with the madness he had just heard. She tilted her head, holding his gaze with audacity. The young woman seemed amused by her companion's emotional exhaustion. The two remained standing in the center of the hall in a silent impasse. While he seemed to question reality, she waited, unwavering. The young nobleman felt cold sweat run down his face. The overwhelming pressure he had just witnessed still echoed in his mind, leaving him visibly shaken. The girl, however, seemed amused by the chaotic situation. While she laughed openly, her servant tried to intervene cautiously, clearly uncomfortable with that uninhibited behavior. The smile on her face denoted a dangerous and vibrant satisfaction. There was no sign of remorse, only the genuine pleasure of someone who knew exactly the power she possessed. Without saying anything else, the young woman turned her back and left the hall. Tavern watched in silence as the servants remained still and respectful during her departure. He remained standing, trying to regain his composure. The tension in the air began to dissipate, but the impact of that sudden encounter still weighed on his shoulders. Fear, however, was a physiological reaction difficult to hide. As much as he tried to maintain a neutral face, his gaze betrayed his internal disturbance. An involuntary tremor took over his fingers. His body reacted instinctively, releasing the adrenaline accumulated during the confrontation. Tavern stared at his own trembling hand, confronted by the physical evidence of his nervousness. He realized how much that presence had deeply affected him, but there were protocols to follow and a hierarchy to respect. The coat of arms on the wall served as a constant reminder of where he was and to whom he owed loyalty. Later, in an imposing office, the atmosphere was one of formality. Tavern presented himself before the main desk, awaiting the attention of his superior. The man sitting in front exuded a calm authority. Rug Valtes, the Lord of Aurum, observed the newcomer with a slight yet calculating smile. With his posture properly recomposed, the young nobleman made his official introduction. He placed his hand on his chest in a gesture of respect, identifying himself promptly. The Lord of Aurum listened attentively, maintaining a friendly expression. His eyes, however, analyzed every detail of the man before him. The meeting proceeded in the silence of that luxurious office. There, away from prying eyes, matters of great importance began to be discussed between the two. The conversation culminated in a crucial question about the future of the city. While the view from the tower stretched out beyond, a proposal was put to the test. Above the bustling streets of the city, the ivory tower stood silent and imposing, isolated from the mundane chaos. The young nobleman approached the restricted entrance. The guards bowed in immediate respect, recognizing his authority and allowing him to pass. The heavy doors gave way, opening the path to the interior of the sanctuary. The young man's gaze, however, revealed a certain apprehension. He knew exactly who he would find inside. Before him, a spiral staircase ascended dizzily towards the light. The path seemed long and lonely. Upon reaching the top, he entered the vast hall of the library. The place seemed deserted, bathed only in the light that entered from the back. The nobleman stopped and looked around impatiently, searching for the presence he knew was hidden there. Suddenly, a figure emerged from behind a table. The girl with long black hair greeted him with exaggerated and theatrical gestures. She displayed a vibrant and slightly manic smile, clearly delighted with the arrival of her visitor. The young man, on the other hand, felt the weight of exhaustion. Her chaotic energy was something he had difficulty dealing with. Without hesitating, she invaded his personal space, complaining about her weight and demanding immediate attention aggressively. He chose to ignore the drama and continued walking through the stone hall, leaving the girl behind momentarily. Hidden under a sheet, she didn't give up, starting to offer reading suggestions and literary genres to try to attract his interest. The questions became increasingly impertinent as the nobleman carried her unceremoniously, resigned to that absurd situation. Even in that position, the girl maintained a sly smile. There was a sharp intelligence hidden behind her childish provocations. A heavy stack of books was placed on the table, echoing the weight of the knowledge that needed to be absorbed. The girl warned that most of those volumes wouldn't serve his purpose, but she pointed out a specific section that might be useful. The young man followed the suggestion and selected one of the tomes from the shelf, feeling the texture of the binding. The cover displayed runic symbols, indicating that the content held within belonged to a distant era or culture. With curiosity, he opened the book, revealing pages filled with complex diagrams and texts. Tavern delved into the reading, absorbing every detail with an expression of fascination and discovery. It became a ritual. Day after day, he repeated the same routine of isolation and intensive study in the library. Through those pages, he began to mentally map the geography of the world and understand its diverse races. The young man learned about the existence of magical creatures and beings that inhabited the deep forests. His studies also revealed the mysteries of the oceans and the legends about the sea people. He visualized the history of past conflicts, marked by shining helmets and weapons of great power. The scene changed to an imposing office, where a mature man waited behind his work desk. The young man appeared before him, maintaining a respectful posture as silence hung in the luxurious environment. The man then turned and began to speak, his expression indicating that he had something serious to discuss with the boy. The man massaged his temples forcefully. The conversation seemed to be causing him a tremendous headache. Before him, Tavern waited in silence, maintaining a formal posture as he awaited the verdict. The officer reprimanded the young man severely, questioning whether he thought the mages had free time to waste. Returning to his desk, the man ended the matter, making it clear that he had much more urgent concerns to address. However, Tavern was not shaken by the apparent rejection. A slight smile of confidence appeared on his face as he left. Later, the group passed through the fortress gates, beginning the mission that had been assigned to them. Under the open sky, the girl stretched her arms up high, relieving the tension before the walk. The team advanced together. The young woman with pink hair led the group, showing enthusiasm, while the boys followed her. She turned back, drawing Tavern's attention with her usual energy. The other companion offered a sheepish smile and a wink, as if apologizing for his colleague's agitation. Tavern observed the interaction calmly. His instincts, however, remained on high alert. Suddenly, the atmosphere changed. Dark figures with mortal wounds exposed and glowing eyes appeared before them. The attack was physical and immediate. The girl had to retreat sharply when something broke through the ground to hit her. Tavern's gaze sharpened instantly. The tranquility of the walk had vanished. A warning cry escaped her lips, signaling the start of combat against the ambush. The group of soldiers assumed combat position, blocking the path of the dark creature. The tension in the forest was palpable as the warriors prepared for the imminent confrontation. Suddenly, the beast advanced with an explosion of terrifying speed. The guards shouted warnings to each other, belatedly realizing that the enemy would not hesitate to attack. The creature was too fast for the front line to contain. Ignoring the soldiers, the monster shot like a blur directly to the rear, targeting the most vulnerable members of the group. The pink-haired girl barely had time to process the approach. The imminent danger was reflected in her gaze, paralyzed by the speed of the attack heading for her face. However, before the fatal blow could hit her, something cut through the air. A flash of energy intercepted the trajectory, saving the young woman at the last possible instant. A pillar of blue light descended from the heavens with devastating force, splitting the battlefield. The energy barrier instantly separated the combatants, creating a safe impact zone. The attack hit the monster head-on, piercing its natural defense. The creature roared in pain and agony as its blood gushed out, unable to resist that sudden power. The dark-haired warrior and his companion turned, completely stunned. The sudden and powerful intervention left them momentarily without reaction to what had just happened. Amidst the dust raised by the impact, a figure emerged, walking calmly. The savior wielded a bright circular weapon, dissipating the smoke with his simple presence. Tavern revealed his face, displaying an expression of absolute confidence. The young man seemed to have the situation entirely under control, facing the result of his magic with serenity.